My name is Foday Turay. I am a DACA recipient, a prosecutor, a husband, and a dad. And without question, a patriot. My love for this country stems from my elementary school days, when I recited the Pledge of Allegiance with all my classmates each morning. My family came to the United States in search of freedom and safety. I was born in Sierra Leone at a time of great civil unrest. When I was 4 years old, my father was killed, and my mother and grandmother and I fled to Guinea, a neighboring country. My mother was able to migrate to the United States, but I stayed with my grandmother, who died shortly after my mother left. I came to the United States on my 7th birthday in 2003. I have been here ever since. I learned that I was undocumented when I tried to get a driver's license. It was one of the worst days of my life. In 2012, I was thrown a lifeline when DACA was announced. Thanks to DACA, I was able to graduate from college and attend law school on a full merit scholarship. I now work full-time for the District Attorney's Office in Philadelphia. During this time, I met and married my beautiful wife, Jaxiel, who is here with me today. And we bought a house, and we had our son. The opportunity to address all of you on behalf of DACA recipient and mixed status families like mine is not one I take for granted. My wife and I have spent years building community, and we're extremely anxious about what the future might bring. I feel the consequences of mass deportation on a personal level, on a community level, and on a societal level. On a personal level, my wife is here, and I have no family in Sierra Leone to help sustain me. I'm currently the breadwinner in my family. If I were to be deported, my wife and our son would be left without to pay the mortgage. My son would also be without a father. My deportation would hurt my own U.S. citizen mother and my wife's extended family, all of whom are United States citizens. My wife is the primary caregiver of her mother, who is legally disabled and has a tumor in her brain. My wife's mother requires chemotherapy injection each month in order to control the size of the tumor on her brain. If I were to be deported, my wife would no longer be able to play such a critical role in her mother's life. My wife should not have to choose between caring for her mother, who is legally disabled and has a brain tumor, and me. My brother-in-law should not have to choose between re-enlisting the Marines next year and risking his mother's health if my wife is not here to care for her. My brother-in-law has been serving in the United States Marines since he graduated high school. On a community level, my taxes help fund my community's road, school, and overall well-being. If I were to be ripped from my community, the taxes I pay would go with me. My wife and I are also devoted Christians with strong ties to our church. Finally, the people of Philadelphia would be hurt if I were to disappear. Victims of crimes whose cases I prosecute will lose an ally in their fight for justice. On a society level, mass deportation would be devastating. As a prosecutor, I know how delicate the ties between law enforcement and immigrants can be. If immigrants are afraid to cooperate with the police or prosecutors like myself because they're afraid of deportation, we all suffer. When you have ICE agents patrolling courthouses and police stations, you create a category of people who are less willing to report crimes and less willing to cooperate with law enforcement in solving crimes. Mass deportation hurts all of us, our family, our community, and our society. We owe it to ourselves and to our country to reject mass deportation and look for a solution for dreamers whose lives have become deeply rooted in the country and strengthen our borders. DACA recipient and long-term undocumented individuals in mixed-status families have become pillars in their homes. Removing them would place hardship on U.S. citizens like my mother-in-law, U.S. citizens like my wife, who depends on our contribution in the House. This will cause an incentive for those U.S. citizens to turn to social welfare programs due to one less income in the home. After more than 2 decades here, I can absolutely state that this is my home. I am part of the fabric of my community, and they are part of me. The federal government may not have fully recognized this truth yet, but I long for the day when they do. Until that day comes, I'll continue to contribute everything to my house, to my mother-in-law, to my son, to my wife, and to my entire family. Thank you all so much for your time and attention to this critical issue.
Mr. Turay, are you undocumented? Pardon me, say it again.
Yes, Senator.
And why are you undocumented?
I came here from a civil unrest. I had no choice. My life was in danger. My mom told me the story when I was trying to get my driver's license.
How old were you when you came?
I came here when I was 7 years old.
What do you do today?
I'm a prosecutor. I represent victims of crimes and go after heinous people that have committed crimes against the Morans family.
You've talked about Ms. Moran's situation a minute or so earlier, but the perpetrator of the crime against her daughter Rachel would be the type of person that you would prosecute? Yes, Senator. I think there is a fundamental difference we're being asked to acknowledge here. Is there a difference between Mr. Turay and the animal who attacked Ms. Moran's daughter? Of course there is. This man for a living is prosecuting criminals. This other individual is a clear criminal with a record. When we say massive deportation, should we consider them the same because they're both undocumented? Let me ask you this, Mr. Reichlin-Melnick. Most Americans, when you talk about the cost to the government in billions of dollars for this deportation, are going to say what most of us would fundamentally say, keep me safe. I don't care what the hell it costs. So is it realistic, if we're talking about a massive deportation, for us to be looking at federal budgets for financing?
I think it's important for people to understand that ICE already goes after people with criminal records all the time. And in fact, that has been the priority of the previous 2 to 3 or more presidential administrations, and is what Congress sets. So the overwhelming majority of people who would be the targets of a mass deportation campaign do not have criminal records. They are people who have been living otherwise law-abiding lives in this country, living, working, and in many cases paying taxes.
So you estimate, at least in one publication here, that the cost of massive deportation would be $316 billion?
At a minimum. In fact, if you look at it over the course of an 11-year operation, it could be as much as $1 trillion.
And that's for conducting sufficient arrests, detaining immigrants en masse, legal processing, and removal for those 4 categories.
That's right. And we're looking at hundreds of billions of dollars to carry out a deportation of 4% of the U.S. population.
So if you want to do a massive deportation to get Mr. Turay out of this country, you're talking about a massive amount of money that has to be spent.
Enormous sums.
And we hear from General Manner the impact it could have on our National Guard and military if they are given this responsibility. Have you taken that into consideration?
We weren't even able to account for the costs of the military, so you should consider our estimates to be conservative. The actual costs would likely be significantly higher because there are so many factors that we couldn't even attempt to estimate.
You write, to carry out over 13 million arrests in a short period of time would require somewhere between 220,000 and 409,000 new government employees and law enforcement officers. Nearly impossible given current hiring challenges across law enforcement agencies. Could you explain that?
Well, right now, ICE only has about 8,500 officers in the entire agency, and less than 1,000 are assigned to fugitive operations, whose job it is to go out into the community and arrest people. But because the overwhelming majority of undocumented immigrants have no interaction with the criminal justice system, they have no criminal offenses, that means that to arrest them would require going out into the community, finding them, and rounding them up. And in order to do that would require an enormous investment in personnel, far beyond any law enforcement operation ever conducted in the United States history.
So if we are determined to remove Mr. Turay, the prosecutor from Philadelphia, from America, and send him back to Sierra Leone or someplace like that, you're talking about massive amounts of money. if we are to focus on the truly dangerous people in this country to make sure that they are removed and should be, that is a lesser amount for sure.
That's right. And in fact, if you look at data on ICE's own data, non-detained docket, which has already been cited by several members here, that is looking at about 1.2% or less of people who have any sort of serious violent offense. And of course, the resources involved there would be much smaller than trying to deport 13 million people.
Making a priority the dangerous people who are in this country or those who are here illegally and could be dangerous certainly is a much different assignment than saying massive deportations. Thank you, Mr. Malik. Senator Graham.